I'd like to welcome Philippe Rovard, who's been director of the Cochrane France for some time. He's a rheumatologist with an epidemiological background. He's going to talk to us about the methodological aspects of living
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased that you've been in Paris for this meeting. A few years ago, we have proposed to perform living network meta-analysis, and I will explain to you what we have done. My first question was, does the current systematic review address the needs of patient, physician, and decision makers? In fact, when we perform a systematic review, typically we focus on the comparison of two treatments, A versus B or A versus placebo. But the quick question posed by patient, physician, and decision maker is not this one. It's among all available treatments for a given disease, which intervention works best? And to this end, reviews should ideally incorporate all treatments available for the condition of interest, all clinical trials assessing these treatments. And in fact, I'm sure that it's not the case. Therefore, to assess the randomized evidence not covered by systematic review, we performed a first study in the field of lung cancer. And we take the example of second-line treatments of advanced non-small cell lung cancer, because we have a lung cancer group in France and we want to work on lung cancer. And we perform a comprehensive strategy to identify all randomized control trials with published and unpublished results, all systematic reviews that address at least one comparison between the treatments available. And we have performed that from 2009 to 2015 for each year. For each year, we constructed cumulative networks of randomized evidence. We evaluated the amount of evidence missing from systematic review published in comparison to the total randomized evidence available at each time, with a proportion of missing trials, missing patients, missing treatment comparison. And here you have the network of treatments. We have 58 treatments, 92 trials, 32,000 patients, and during this year, 29 systematic reviews were performed. But in fact, there is always evidence missing from these systematic reviews. For each year, from 2009 to 2015, we perform at January 1st every year the network. The evidence covered by all existing systematic reviews was consistently incomplete. Only 40 to 60% of treatments were 40 to 60% of treatments were missing. 45 to 70% of trials were missing. 30% to 58% of patients were missing. In fact, we have trials that were or treatments that were not covered by any systematic reviews. We have treatments that were partially covered by systematic reviews, but without all the trials. Therefore, if you are a physician, you have only, or if you are a patient, or if you have a lung cancer, you have only systematic reviews on half of the treatment, including half of the trials, and half of the patients are not included in this systematic reviews. Therefore, my view is that there is a failure of the current systematic review system. Even when considered collectively, the series of existing systematic review does not provide a complete and up-to-date synthesis of evidence for a given condition. And the current process leads to a series of disparate systematic reviews in terms of search dates, methodological quality. Furthermore, the scope of the systematic review is frequently overlapping. Therefore, my view is that the overall systematic review system is not efficient. In addition, we know perfectly that the evidence synthesis process is affected by the poor quality of primary research. And always systematic reviewers that are complaining about the poor quality and transparency of primary research. Half of completed randomized control trials are not published. 40% of published trials are at high risk of bias. Incomplete reporting and selective reporting are frequent, and important outcomes are frequently missing. Here you have the network of trials for various outcomes. Here it's for PFS, and here it's for quality of life. As you could see, there is very few trials in the field of lung cancer with data on quality of life. And it's a pity not to have at least a very simple questionnaire about quality of life in all the trials in the field of lung cancer. Therefore, we may wonder if we should rethink the evidence synthesis ecosystem. And my proposal was to move from a series of meta-analyses to a live cumulative or living network meta-analysis. Therefore, we propose switching from a series of disparate systematic review and meta-analyses, which are frequently out of date and redundant, to a single systematic review on evidence synthesis, including meta-analysis and network meta-analysis of all available treatments, continuously updated for specification or therapeutic indication, what we call living network meta-analysis. In fact, in a living network meta-analysis, you have the initial network of trials, and you perform the first network meta-analysis, and you updated your network with new treatments, if there is new treatments, and with new trials. And you have the different phases as for any systematic review: identification of new treatments, search of trials, selection of trials, data extraction, assessment of the risk of bias, and the update of the network and synthesis. And the question was, is it doable to do that or not? Is it the workload is perhaps too important, therefore we are not clear that it was doable. Therefore we try to do that. And here you have the workload of the living network meta-analysis for living meta-analysis on second-line treatments of non-small cell lung cancer. For the initial network meta-analysis, we have at the end 45 treatments. The number of records needed to screen was 8,000, and the number of trials needed to be extracted was 77. And at each iteration of the living network meta-analysis, every 4 months, we have 2 new additional treatments. We have 380 new records to screen. It's approximately 5%. And the number of trials needed to be extracted is 4 every 4 months, 5%. Therefore, my view is that investing a massive amount of resources to produce network meta-analysis and not maintaining it afterwards does not make sense. And here you have the pace of evidence generation for 77 network meta-analysis over the last 10 years. And as you could see, there is not so many trials in this network meta-analysis. For example, here we have approximately 2 or 3 new trials per year for this network meta-analysis. Therefore, my view is that it's doable. And what we propose is to move from a one-shot research investment by small teams to a living network meta-analysis maintained by a community of researchers for a long period of time. And we could have several groups of people involved. Any individuals interested in a given condition could help to identify new treatments and trials. Group of experts in a given condition, clinicians, trialists, and members of cooperative group could help to validate the reported treatment and trials, to define the nodes in the network of trials, which treatments are in the same nodes, and to help for the screening and selection of records. And a group of trial reviewers could do the manual search of additional sources, could contact trialists, identify multiple reports from the same trial, could extract the data and assess the risk of bias. And my view is that we could also improve evidence synthesis, but also we could improve the production of evidence beyond evidence synthesis. And my proposal is to develop a living community for one condition rather than siloed activities. A community including systematic reviewers, but also clinicians, patients, trialists, methodologists, statisticians, and guideline experts. And we could leverage this community to improve beyond evidence synthesis the whole production of evidence. We could have this living community for one condition, and they could perform the usual task of any systematic review, plus additional tasks that are useful for other purposes. When you are extracting data for a systematic review, it's not so much work to extract other data such as the name and address of the PI, the name of the institution, the name of the founders, the outcomes used, and compare them to the core outcome set for this disease, and search for ongoing trials. And if we have additional data, we could have beyond the living evidence synthesis, perhaps living guidelines, living monitoring of trial quality and transparency, living disclosing of the quality and transparency of trials, and living mapping of research in this specific condition. Therefore, we could move from living network meta-analysis to living guidelines, and living NMR could help to optimize the guideline development process and to update recommendations as soon as new relevant evidence becomes available. It could improve real-time knowledge transfer by developing living guidelines, and we could help to provide timely, up-to-date, and high-quality guidance to target users. We could also move from living network meta-analysis to living monitoring of trials quality and transparency for this specific condition, with comparison of outcome used versus core outcome sets proposed by Comet, with assessment of the risk of bias, because I do not think that trialists want to perform trials at high risk of bias. At 40% of their trials at high risk of bias. If we are able to show them at the beginning of the trial that they are very frequently at high risk of bias, perhaps we will modify the way they perform trials. We could avoid the waste of research, and we could avoid the most frequent methodological errors they have done in the previous randomized control trials. We could also perform a living monitoring of trial transparency, about the quality of reporting, the access possible or not to the protocol, the data sharing, and we could have a living disclosing of the quality and transparency of trials by funders, cooperative groups, journals, universities. We can also have a more proactive and incentive approach to transparency. We can identify on clinicaltrial.gov or draft all trials as soon as they are terminated, and encourage systematically PIs to give access to their protocol, post their results on clinicaltrial.gov, publish their results, archive their data, share their data, and we could propose them a practical repository solution, because I'm not sure that all clinicians performing trials are aware of repository for clinical trials. And as an example, we could be proactive for improving transparency. As an example, for any trials appearing as terminated on ct.gov, we could send automatic emails to remind PIs and sponsors the law about posting of results. You know that we have the same law now in USA and EU. And before, 1 year after completion of the trial, it's mandatory to post the results on clinical trial or a draft in Europe. And I have done that. It has been published in the BMJ. I have sent emails to all these PIs, and we doubled the number of trials with results posted in these randomized control trials. Therefore, it was an email signed by me. I think that if it's an email signed by Cochrane or by the community or whatever, it would be much more effective than only an email sent by Philippe Raveau. And we are now able to do that. We are able to produce automatic emails to encourage PIs to plan, to archive, and share their data on protocol. And we could send automatic email if not published after 1 year. We could also move from living network meta-analysis to living mapping of evidence on gaps in research. We could help trialists to plan better trials and improve the research agenda by providing an updated mapping of existing and ongoing research, by helping them to identify gaps to direct future primary trials to the areas for which evidence is most needed. And we could provide information about the main methodological limitation of previous trials to avoid doing the same errors in the next trials. And as an example, to have data about quality of life. And my conclusion is that the evidence synthesis ecosystem needs cataclysmic changes to help really patient, physician, decision makers. That we have to set up living communities to perform evidence synthesis and beyond that could help to improve overall evidence production with more relevant research, better quality research, and therefore more useful systematic reviews. I tried to convince within Cochrane that we could not complain all the day long about the poor quality of primary evidence without trying to help people to improve the primary evidence. And such tooling will limit duplication and time wasting, and it looks doable with an additional manageable workload. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. That's very thought-provoking. I'm sure there's one or two questions.
Bonjour, Philippe. Thank you very much. Very inspiring, and it makes a lot of sense to me, particularly for influencing better primary research as well, and the living nature affecting guidelines, gaps. It makes a lot of sense. What I wanted to ask you, Philippe, is, as you know, I work as a funder as well. What is the funding model? Does it mean that as a funder I have to commit to Philippe Caron and his team for the next 100 years? So I'm just interested, you know, as a funder, how you commit. Is it done in every 5-year tranches? And what if there's a rival team in the US? Before you know it, then you've got duplicate living meta-analysis. So tell me a little bit more about your experience of funding and competitive living NMA.
No, I fully agree with you that there is some issues. There is issues because the funding system is not very easily in line with such a way of thinking. And it's the same for the publication system. For example, what we could do with the iteration, we could only put the results on the website and so on. Therefore, I agree that one of the difficulties is that it's a different way of thinking, and we have to change completely the system of funding, the system of publication, and everything is, and the system of reward for the people. Because people in such system are part of the community, and they are working for the community and not for a paper published in a big journal or in the Cochrane collaboration. And therefore, we have to change completely the system. And I agree that it's the main difficulty. I think that many people are in line with the objective, but it's difficult for the system because we propose to change the system. It's difficult for Cochrane to think, and I think that Cochrane is the best placed organization for organizing that. And it's why I push Cochrane to do that, because I think that people could be confident in Cochrane for doing such type of work and for doing that for years. And but I don't have a very precise proposal. In France, I decided to do that because I think that we need to do a proof of concept. Therefore, we have decided to do a proof of concept. And I found the funding for doing that. But after that, we have to take that for the system. But my view is that it's a waste of time, a waste of money, not doing, for example, at least some efforts to improve primary research, because it's so easy when you are performing the huge work that is a network meta-analysis to add a small number of additional questions and so on to address the most important methodological errors or and to help people in this way. That it's, I think that we have to go in this way, even if it's not easy. I agree that it's not easy.
Thank you.
I think you touched on it just before, talking about the publication side of it. How do anticipate sort of the quality is maintained? So, I mean, obviously you can't send it out for peer review every 4 months, so each time you add to it and the sort of the quality elements that Cochrane brings, the peer review, the editorial process, how do you think that would work?
I agree that we have to think also differently about the peer review. Because the classical peer review is not doable for such type of network meta-analysis, or perhaps it's doable for the initial network meta-analysis, but not for the iteration. But I think that is it better to have a peer review that is performed after publication rather than before publication, or to have systematic reviews that are covering only 50% of the evidence. Therefore, we have a balance, and we have to make choices. I think that with this system, we could only have a peer review after publication. It's difficult to imagine that we will wait for 6 months for a peer review and so on. Therefore, it's also a system that is much more transparent, because you could put all the data on the website. If people want to redo the network meta-analysis or whatever, they have access to data, they could say that they are not in line with the way we assess the risk of bias or whatever. And it's a very transparent way to do. But I agree that I do not solve the problem of peer review. But, I am not 100% sure that the current process within Cochrane is useful. You know that there is people trying to perform a comparison, I think, in Canada of rapid reviews against classical reviews. I think that's a process, a current process, when you have 100 questions from people to answer for your review. I am not 100% sure that it increases. Yes, it's probably an improvement, but I'm not sure that the improvement requires such a work.
Wonderful talk, Philippe. I'm wondering, should we be doing anything besides network meta-analysis, given these are such a superior potential methodology, and the Cochrane especially has to decide how to prioritize its resources now. Is there for traditional meta-analysis, given all of the advantages that network meta-analysis has?
No, I don't think that there is. I think it's better for Cochrane to focus on a small number of conditions with living network meta-analysis, or network meta-analysis at least, rather than to have a series of meta-analyses that are quite disparate, very frequently out of date, and I think that it's better to. I think that the question of physician is not does the treatment A work? Their question is, you have 10 different treatments, which one I have to choose, and we have to help them to. And it's the same for guidelines developers. And it's also perhaps a way to obtain different type of funding, because we could discuss with health technology assessment groups and so on, because a lot of this work is, for example, there is guideline developers that are redoing network meta-analysis or meta-analysis. Perhaps it's a waste of time. Perhaps it would be better to have all these people working together. And I think also that if we involve trialists, they will improve their trials. And it will be, the work of network of systematic reviewers will be easier at the end. But perhaps I am too idealistic, optimistic about the system. Okay.
Thank you, Philippe. It is a very optimistic and a beautiful vision. Any time for one last question, probably? Yeah.
Maybe more comment. I think you could add that to improve the trials, the reporting of the trials could be better, and especially a standard format for reporting trials, that it's much easier to extract the data. That it's sort of required to publish it in a certain way that you can digitally transfer it to a living meta-analysis.
I fully agree with that. I'm not sure that you are aware of that, but a few years ago we have performed a study comparing data posted on clinicaltrials.gov and data published in articles. And we demonstrated that we have much more data on clinicaltrials.gov rather than in the published articles. And it's mainly because there is a template that people have to fill in clinicaltrials.gov. And it's mandatory for them, and therefore they fill the template. And I agree that it's easier for systematic review.
Thank you so much, Philippe. Lots of food for thought.